Okay, here's a quick recap of where everything is in Pro Tools. So there are two main windows, the edit window, and if I push Command equals sign, I get the mix window. And I can toggle between these as much as I like. In the edit window, there are these sidebars here. So there's a sidebar here that shows track information. And this is where I see a list of tracks, and I can hide tracks by clicking these little dots. And then there's groups, which we'll talk about later. There's also clips. So if I extend this a little bit, I can change the width by dragging this dividing line here. Any clips that I have in the project, I can also select from the clips window here. And if I don't see either of these sidebars, it's because these little arrows have been set to hide them. So there's an arrow down here that hides this one. There's an arrow down here that hides this one. Similarly, on the mixer, there's a sidebar for tracks and groups, and there's an arrow that hides that. The next thing to notice is there are these little menus here that govern what you can see across the top and down the side. So looking at the top right now, we have bars and beats, minutes and seconds, time code 2, feet and frames, samples, tempo, meter, markers, lots of stuff. And that's all governed here. And if we want, we can collapse this down to just the main ruler, which is going to be minutes and seconds. And then we can add things if we want. So perhaps we want to see the markers. Down this way, this is the list of tracks here, and these are always visible. These are the main track controls for record, arming, solo, mute, different types of view that we can see, and whatnot. This menu here governs other things that we can see in this column. So if I choose all, boom, here we have a really huge list of stuff, comments, information about the mic pre, instruments, inserts where our effects are, 2 columns for that, 2 columns for sends, and then an input-output column. Most of these probably are not going to be useful. Probably the most useful thing might be to stick to these 2, basic track controls and input-output. Possibly inserts if you're using a lot of inserts, and once you've set your I/O, maybe you don't even need that as much anymore. Those are certainly the 3 most useful ones. Similarly, in the mixer, right now in the mixer I'm set to look at inserts, sends, input-output, and track controls. If I go, now this is out of the frame so you can't quite see it, but if I choose minimal, like that, then you see that I'm left with just the track controls and the input-output. So that's the basic thing. I'm going to add my first row of inserts, and this is a pretty common configuration. This is about as much as you'll need most of the time. You might also need sends if you're doing a lot of internal routing. Looking across the top here, notice that we don't have a transport, so the place where you push record, play, pause, stop, fast forward, that's missing. We can bring it up as a window, like this, or we can add it to the top here. There's a little, I'm going to bring this into the frame, there's a little menu that lets us choose other things that we can add across the top here. So zoom controls live over here, the transport lives over here. As with the other menu options, there's an option for minimal, which shrinks this down to the bare essentials. There's also an option for all, which expands the top bar out to everything. And you can adjust that to suit your working method. I'm going to put the transport back in here, and the zoom controls just for fun. Okay. So that's a quick orientation to where stuff is. There's also 2 more things worth pointing out. The memory locations window. So if I play a sound, and as it's playing, if I push enter on the keypad on a laptop, or on a desktop rather, or on a laptop, if I push function return, I can drop a marker. This is helpful for having a timing reference and a place to edit to. And these show up in the window here where I can double click and edit their properties and whatnot, and that window can go away. There's also a big counter, which is exactly what it says it is. Useful if you are far away from the computer and you need to see the running project time. Maybe if you're recording in the vocal isolation booth and you need to see the time scrolling across really big. Those are the most useful windows there. So that's a quick orientation to where things are in Pro Tools.